Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Before we get started tonight, just want to take a few moments of silence to hold space for the war happening in Ukraine and trying to just let in um, the feeling around that. So please join me in just holding some space in your heart for a moment. Over to you, Jen. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everyone to this week's Learning and Mending She Braids Together. As we all settle into our squares, I will start off tonight with our embroidery of the week, and I'm very excited to share this one because the person who created it is here tonight. So we are featuring Walker Rowland's Common Raven, and I would say it's not common at all. It's incredibly unique, colorful, creative. I'm in love with it. Um, there's so many things about this that are just so magical. The different stitching, the tie dye, and the delicate detail of just an outline. How beautiful and how much this comes to life. So thank you, Walker. It's lovely. Um, and now I will pass it around. I'll introduce myself. My name's Jen. I'm calling in from Studio City. I use she, her pronouns. And tonight I am working also on a common raven. And I will pass it to Olan.
Hey, yes, it's a beautiful embroidery. Olan, she, her pronouns, calling from West Hollywood. Um, Working some more on was it mycelium carbon interaction? No, relationship? Exchange,
Network
carbon
exchange.
exchange. Okay, it's a kind of relationship. And let's see, I shall pass it on to Kate Lane.
Hi, I'm Kate, and I'm joining from Pasadena. And I use she/her pronouns, and tonight I'm working on white sage. And I will pass it along to Emily.
Thanks, Kate. Emily here in Echo Park, neighborhood of Los Angeles, with my doggies Bucky and Lulu, interspecies listening. And I'll be sharing the screen tonight for our reading and working on the audio visual meditation with Stefano. And just really happy to be here with you and continue reading this book. So let me pass it over to Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm calling in from West Covina. I'm also working on a raven, but I guarantee it's not going to turn out like Walker's. But I'm happy to be here, and I am going to pass it along to Jasmine.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from Arcata, California. And I'm gonna pick up on my hermit thrush that's down below me in the loft. Happy to be here as always. Thanks everyone. I'll pass it to Rowena.
Hi, I'm Rowena. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Los Angeles as well. And I'm also working on the hermit thrush, which I'm getting very close to finishing. It's been a long one, but enjoyable. I will pass it to, Susie.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Susie. I have never, ever, ever visited you all before. I am absolutely madly in love with breeding sweetgrass. I think it is a hymn for all ages. It's one of the most beautifully written books ever. And my dear friend Linda Ginn told me about this discussion, and she said, wait, you've got to come on. So I'm not doing any needlework. I did when I was a little girl, but I'm not doing any right now. But I'm delighted to be here with all of you and really excited for the discussion. Oh, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you. And I'll throw it to Linda.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Linda. I use she, her pronouns as well. And I've had the extreme good fortune to have been to Metabolic Studio before. And I was introduced to it by Millie Mason Moore, who's sort of my first gardening mentor. And I love her. But I just got the email for this for the first time yesterday. But Braiding Sweetgrass is a book that's been on my list of books to read, and so it sort of forced me. So I have the reading for today, and I'm delighted to be with you all. And I don't sew or do anything artistic in that regard, but I'm happy to be with you all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and hearing the book tonight and seeing how you guys do all this. And I guess I will pass it to Izzy.
Hi, my name's Izzy. My pronouns are they, she. I'm calling in from East Hollywood, and I'm working on my underground pattern still. And I am really excited to be here tonight with you all. So I will pass it on to, let's see, Cobby.
Thanks, Izzy. Good evening, everyone. Kavilal calling in from Sacramento. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm really looking forward to this week's reading. Last week, I was just kind of emotionally touched by the reading last week, and so really looking forward to listening along. I'll pass it on to Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in tonight from Rhode Island, Hopkinton, Rhode Island, original territory of the Niantic, Eastern, and Narragansett Indian people. And I am working on white sage. And I will pass it along to, let's see. I will pass it along to Derainer.
Hi, Derainer, calling in from Baldwin Hills, California. I go by she, her pronoun, and I'm excited to be here tonight to listen in. Each week I'm touched by the readings, and I'm just happy to be here. And I'm not sure who has gone. Maybe I can turn it back over to Jen.
Actually, this is perfect. I'll take it over from here. If you didn't have an opportunity to introduce yourself and share what you're working on, you can do that later on this evening during the discussion. Again, welcome everybody to Learning and Mending. Since the pandemic began, Metabolic Studio has moved our weekly open studio practice to Zoom. This is our 7th syllabus, and connecting all of them is the embroideries we continue to make and collect of the living systems we discover as we regenerate the floodplain we're salvaging on Gabrielino land. If you need another or have not received an embroidery kit from us featuring native plants, birds, and microorganisms that the Metabolic Studio is currently cultivating on its project sites, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. She Braids Together follows syllabi on abolitionist writing, Fires of the West, Anna Sings The Mushroom at the End of the World, Freetop Capra's Web of Life, and the Commons. This time around, we'll be focusing on one text, Braiding Sweetgrass. Robin Wall Kimmerer explores our more than human teachers and braids indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the wisdom of plants to tell us stories about the world. The world that is open to us through this text is the commons in its truest sense. It is a world of reciprocity and careful listening. Thank you, Izzy Santana, for interweaving Tending the Commons and She Braids Together by curating this selection from Kimmerer's book. This series centers listening as our guide. There is not one specific leader, but rather a collection of ears and voices. Please join us in reading selections and guiding the discussion afterwards. As in earlier syllabi, we suggest this book be read together aloud. When you hear a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. You don't have to read. We also welcome you to enjoy a gentle and supportive space of listening. We invite you to stand at the precipice of Zoom's silence and stare it down. Even relish the charged silence of crafting together. Our evening will close with an interpretive offering from our collection of videos. Thank you, Emily Lacey, for this offering. For the last 7 weeks on our social media, we've been sharing photographs of native prairie grasses by Jim Richardson, and for the remaining weeks, we'll be sharing Lynn Benson's watercolors, all courtesy of the Beach Museum at Kansas State University. Thank you to Linda Duke, curator at the Beach Museum, for additionally coordinating the writings by the Kansas State University's community. And now I will pass it over to Izzy.
Thank you, Jen. So tonight we're reading 2 chapters, and in these chapters, Kimmerer raises questions of home, belonging, and offering. So in the first chapter we're reading tonight, an offering, she asks, what else can you offer the earth, which has everything? What else can you give but something of yourself? To which she answers, a homemade ceremony, a ceremony that makes home. And she tells us a story about how her own family had different forms of ceremony that were an offering to the earth. And then she follows up this inquiry in another chapter we're reading, in terms of what kinds of offering make a home, in the chapter In the Footsteps of Nana Bushu. And in this chapter, she talks about what it means to become indigenous to place. So she writes that being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. So I'm excited for tonight, and yeah, I'll pass it over to Emily now to do the screen share.
An offering. Our people were canoe people until they made us walk, until our lakeshore lodges were signed away for shanties and dust. Our people were a circle until we were dispersed. Our people shared a language with which to thank the day until they made us forget. But we didn't forget, not quite. Most summer mornings of childhood, I woke to the sound of the outhouse door, the squeak of the hinge followed by the hollow thunk as it shut. I rose to consciousness through the hazy songs of vireos and thrushes, the lapping of the lake, and finally the sound of my father pumping the tank on the Coleman stove. By the time my brother and sisters and I emerged from our sleeping bags, the sun would just be topping the eastern shore, pulling mist off the lake in long white coils. The small 4-cup coffee pot of battered aluminum, blackened with smoke of many fires, would already be thumping. Our family spent summers canoe camping in the Adirondacks, and every day began this way. I can picture my father in his red checked wool shirt standing atop the rocks above the lake. When he lifts the coffee pot from the stove, the morning bustle stops. We know without being told that it's time to pay attention. He stands at the edge of camp with the coffee pot in his hands, holding the top in place with a folded pot holder. He pours coffee out on the ground in a thick brown stream. The sunlight catches the flow, stripping it amber and brown and black as it falls to the earth and steams in the cool morning air. With his face to the morning sun, he pours and speaks into the stillness. Here's to the gods of Talos. The stream runs down over smooth granite to merge with the lake water, as clear and brown as the coffee. I watch it trickle, picking up bits of pale lichen and soaking a tiny clump of moss as it follows a crack to the water's edge. The moss swells with the liquid and unfurls its leaves to the sun. Then, and only then, does he pour out steaming cups of coffee for himself and my mother, who stands at the stove making pancakes. So begins each morning in the North Woods, the words that come before all else.
I was pretty sure that no other family I knew began their day like this, but I never questioned the source of those words, and my father never explained. They were just part of our life among the lakes, but their rhythm made me feel at home, and the ceremony drew a circle around our family. By those words, we said, "Here we are." And I imagined that the land heard us, murmured to itself, "Oh, here are the ones who know how to say thank you." Tahawas is the Algonquin name for Mount Marcy, the highest peak in the Adirondacks. It's called Mount Marcy to commemorate a governor who never set foot on those wild slopes. Tahawas, thus cloud splitter, is its true name, invoking its essential nature. Among our Potawatomi people, there are public names and true names. True names are used only by intimates and in ceremony. My father had been on Tahawas's summit many times and knew it well enough to call it by name, speaking with intimate knowledge of the place and the people who came before. When we call a place by name, it is transformed from wilderness to homeland. I imagined that this beloved place knew my true name as well, even when I myself did not. Sometimes my father would name the gods of Forked Lake or South Pond or Brandy Brook Flow, wherever our tents were settled for the night. I came to know that each place was inspirited, was home to others before we arrived and long after we left. As he called out the names and offered a gift, the first coffee, he quietly taught us the respect we owed these other beings and how to show our thanks for summer mornings. I knew that in the long ago times, our people raised their thanks in morning songs, in prayer, and the offering of sacred tobacco. But at that time in our family history, we didn't have sacred tobacco and we didn't know the songs. They'd been taken away from my grandfather at the doors of the boarding school. But history moves in a circle, and here we were, the next generation, back to the loon-filled lakes of our ancestors, back to canoes. My mother had her own more pragmatic ritual of respect, the translation of reverence and intention into action. Before we paddled away from any camping place, she made us kids scour the place to be sure that it was spotless. No burnt matchstick, no scrap of paper escaped her notice. Leave this place better than you found it, she admonished. And so we did. We also had to leave wood for the next person's fire, with tinder and kindling carefully sheltered from rain by a sheet of birch bark. I liked to imagine their pleasure, those other paddlers, arriving after dark to find a ready pile of fuel to warm their evening meal. My mother's ceremony connected us to them, too. The offering was made only under an open sky and never back in town where we lived. On Sundays, when other kids would go to church, my folks would take us out along the river to look for herons and muskrats, to the woods to hunt for spring flowers, or on picnics. The words came along. For our winter picnics, we would walk all morning on snowshoes and then build a fire in the center of a circle stomped down with our webbed feet. This time the pot was full of bubbling tomato soup, and the first poured was for the snow. The first draft poured was for the snow. Here's to the gods of Tahawas. Only then would we wrap mittened hands around our steaming cups.
And yet, as I grew to adolescence, the offering began to leave me angry or sad. The circle that had brought me a sense of belonging turned inside out. I heard in the words a message that we did not belong because we spoke in the language of exiles. It was a second-hand ceremony. Somewhere there were people who knew the right ceremony, who knew the lost language and spoke the true names, including my own. But still, every morning I watched the coffee disappear into the crumbly brown hummus, as if returning to itself, in the same way that the flow of coffee down the rock opened the leaves of the moss. Ceremony brought the quiescent back to life, opened my mind and heart to what I knew but had forgotten. The words and the coffee called us to remember that these woods and lakes were a gift. Ceremonies large and small have the power to focus attention to a way of living awake in the world. The visible became invisible, merging with the soil. It may have been a second-hand ceremony, but even through my confusion, I recognized that the earth drank it up as if it were right. The land knows you even when you're lost. A people's story moves along like a canoe caught in the current, being carried closer and closer to where we had begun. As I grew up, my family found again the tribal connections that had been frayed but never broken by history. We found the people who knew our true names. And when I first heard in Oklahoma the sending of thanks to the 4 directions at the Sunrise Lodge, the offering in the old language of the sacred tobacco. I heard it as if in my father's voice. The language was different, but the heart was the same.
Ours was a solitary ceremony, but fed from the same bond with the land, founded on respect and gratitude. Now the circle drawn around us is bigger, encompassing a whole people to which we again belong. But still the offering says, here we are. And still I hear at the end of the words, the land murmuring to itself, oh, here are the ones who know how to say thank you. Today, my father can speak his prayer in our language, but it was here to the gods of Tahawas that came first, in the voice that I will always hear. It was in the presence of the ancient ceremonies that I understood that our coffee offering was not secondhand, it was ours. Much of who I am and what I do is wrapped up in my father's offering by the lake shore. Each day still begins with a version of, here's to the gods of Tahawas, a thanksgiving for that day. My work as an ecologist, a writer, a mother, as a traveler between scientific and traditional ways of knowing, grows from the power of those words. It reminds me of who we are. It reminds me of our gifts and our responsibility to those gifts. Ceremony is a vehicle for belonging to a family, to a people, and to the land. At last, I thought that I understood the offering to the gods of Tahawas. It was for me the one thing that was not forgotten, that which could not be taken away by history. The knowing that we belonged to the land, that we were the people who knew how to say thank you. It welled up from a deep blood memory that the land, the lakes, and the spirit had held for us. But years later, with my own answer already in place, I asked my father, where did the ceremony come from? Did you learn it from your father and he from his? Did it stretch all the way back to the time of the canoes? He thought for a long time. No, I don't think so. It's just what we did. It seemed right. That was all.
Some weeks went by, though, and when we spoke again, he said, I've been thinking about the coffee and how we started giving it to the ground. You know, it was boiled coffee. There's no filter, and if it boils too hard, the ground foams up and get caught in the spout. So the first cup you pour would get that plug of grounds and be spoiled. I think we first did it to clear the spout. It was as if he told me that the water didn't change to wine. The whole web of gratitude, the whole story of remembrance was nothing more than the dumping of the grounds. But you know, he said, that there wasn't always grounds to clear. It started out that way, but it became something else, a thought. It was a kind of respect, a kind of thanks. On a beautiful summer morning, I suppose you could call it joy. That, I think, is the power of ceremony. It marries the mundane to the sacred. The water turns to wine, the coffee to a prayer, the material and the spiritual mingle like grounds mingled with humus, transformed like steam rising from a mug into the morning mist. What else can you offer the earth, which has everything? What else can you offer the earth, which is everything? What else can you give but something of yourself? A homemade ceremony, a ceremony that makes a home.
Thanks so much to all our readers. I'm just gonna take a moment to move to the next section, so bear with the screen share. Sorry, I'm just having a little trouble finding it, but almost there.
Do you want me to get the page numbers for you?
I've got the page number 205, but it's just the difference between the thumbnail number and what's on the PDF.
If you do control find, you could just type in the name of the chapter and it should come right up.
Almost there.
Yeah, the numbers that I wrote down correlate to the actual pages. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Thank you, Emily.
It's okay. Just sometimes, technology likes to add some extra layers of difficulty, just to see.
Yeah, I think it's in
Can you try? You can try control find, or if you use the Apple, like the Apple thing F, and then you type in like the chapter, and it'll pop it up.
I think it's if you go down a little bit further, keep going, like 4 more pages.
Yeah, almost there, guys. You see, I think it's skipping here. That's the problem. $195. Oh my gosh, why is it skipping that last part? It's almost like it's stopping at 201. Sorry.
It's okay. I wonder it's not letting you scroll in.
Okay, Emily.
It's stopping at 201, this PDF. I don't have no idea why.
Let me
Hold
see if
on.
I have a PDF that doesn't do that.
Yeah, that's what's happening. This PDF stops at 201 for some reason. Hold on, guys. Sorry, I'll pull up another one.
One also that goes past 201.
There we are. Sorry about that, everybody.
We're still only seeing a blank page, or at least I am.
Oh, sorry, it's taking the old one. Hold on. Sorry.
And I just dropped a PDF in the chat bar if this doesn't work.
Okay, here we are. Can you guys see it now?
Yes, I can start. In the footsteps of Nana Bushu, becoming indigenous to place. Fog shrouds the land. There's just this rock in the half darkness and the surf rising and falling with a thunderous roar, reminding me how tenuous my perch is on this tiny island. I almost feel her feet on these cold, wet rocks instead of my own. Sky woman on a speck of land, alone in a cold, dark sea before she made our home. When she fell from Skyworld's, Turtle Island was her Plymouth Rock, her Ellis Island. The mother of the people was first an immigrant. I'm new here too. On this shore at the western edge of the continent, new to how land appears and disappears in this place with the tides and with the fog. No one knows my name here, and I don't know theirs. Without this exchange of the barest recognition, I feel like I could disappear in the fog along with everything else. It is said that the Creator gathered together the four sacred elements and breathed life into them to give form to original man. Before setting him upon Turtle Island, the last of all beings created. First, man was given the name Nana Bushu. The Creator called out the name to the four directions so that the others would know who was coming. Nana Bushu, part man, part Manido, a powerful spirit being, is the personification of life forces, the Anishinaabe culture hero, and our great teacher of how to be human. In Nana Bushu's form as original man and in our own, we humans are the newest arrivals on the earth, the youngsters, just learning to find our way.
I can imagine how it might have been for him in the beginning, before anyone knew him and he did not know them. I too was a stranger at first in the dark, dripping forest perched at the edge of the sea, but I sought out an elder, my Satika spruce grandmother, with a lap wide enough for many grandchildren. I introduced myself, told her my name and why I had come. I offered her tobacco from my pouch and asked if I might visit in her community for a time. She asked me to sit down, and there was a place right between her roots. Her canopy towers above the forest, and her swaying foliage is constantly murmuring to her neighbors, I know she'll eventually pass the world and my name on the wind. Nanabusu did not know his parentage or his origins, only that he was set down into a fully peopled world of plants and animals, winds and water. He was an immigrant too. Before he arrived, the world was all here in balance and harmony, each one fulfilling their purpose in the creation. He understood, as some did not, that this was not the new world, but on that was an ancient before he came. The ground where I sat with Satika, grandmother, is deep with nettles, soft, and centuries of humus. The trees are so old that my lifetime compared to theirs as just as a bird song long. I suspect the Nanabuzu walked like I do, in awe, looking up into the trees. So often I stumble. The creator gave Nanabuzu some task in the role as an original man. The original instructions, Anasanabi Elder Eddie Benton Banani beautifully retells the story of Nanabuzu's first work, to walk through the world that Sky Woman had danced into life. His instructions were to walk in such a way that each step is a greeting to Mother Earth. But he wasn't quite sure yet what that meant. Fortunately, although his were the first man's prints upon the earth, there were many paths to follow, made by all those whose home this already was. The time when the original instructions were given, we might call a long time ago. For in the popular way of thinking, history draws timeline, as if time marched in lockstep in only one direction. Some people say that time is a river into which we can step but once as it flows in a straight path to the sea. But Nanabuzu's people know time as a circle. Time is not a river running inexorably to the sea, but the sea itself. It's tides that appear and disappear, the fog that rises to become rain in a different river, all things that were will come again.
In the way of linear time, you might hear Nanabuju's stories as mythic lore of history, a recounting of the long ago past and how things came to be. But in circular time, these stories are both history and prophecy, stories for a time yet to come. If time is a turning circle, there is a place where history and prophecy converge. The footprints of first man lie in the path behind us and on the path ahead. With all the power and all the failings of human being, Nanabuju did his best with the original instructions and tried to become native to his new home. His legacy is that we are still trying, but the instructions have gotten tattered along the way and many have been forgotten. After all these generations since Columbus, some of the wisest of native elders still puzzle over the people who came to our shores. They look at the toll on the land. They look at the toll on the land and say, the problem with these new people is that they don't have both feet on the shore. One is still on the boat. They don't seem to know whether they're staying or not. The same observation is heard from some contemporary scholars who see in the social pathologies and relentlessly materialistic cultures the fruit of homelessness, a rootless past. America has been called the home of second chances. For the sake of the people and the land, the urgent work of the second man may be to set aside the ways of the colonist and become indigenous to place. But can Americans, as a nation of immigrants, learn to live here, as we were saying, with both feet on the shore? What happens when we truly become native to a place, when we finally make a home? Where are the stories that lead the way? If time does in fact eddy back onto itself, maybe the journey of the first man will provide footsteps to guide the journey of the second. Nanabuju's journey first took him toward the rising sun, to the place where the day begins. As he walked, he worried how he would eat, especially as he was already hungry. How would he find his way? He considered the original instructions and understood that all the knowledge he needed in order to live was present in the land. His role was not to control or change the world as a human, but to learn from the world how to be human. Wabanong, the east, is the direction of knowledge. We send gratitude to the east for the chance to learn every day, to start anew. In the east, Nanabuju received the lesson that Mother Earth is our wisest teacher. He came to know Sima, the sacred tobacco, and how to use it to carry his thoughts to the Creator.
As he continued exploring the land, Nanabojo was given a new responsibility to learn the names of all the beings. He watched them carefully to see how they lived and spoke with them to learn what gifts they carried in order to discern their true names. Right away, he began to feel more at home and was not lonely anymore when he could call the others by name, and they called out to him when he passed, Bojo, still our greeting to one another today. Today, far from my neighbors in Maple Nation, I see some species I recognize and many I do not. So I walk as original man may have done, seeing them for the first time. I try to turn off my science mind and name them with the Nanabojo mind. I've noticed that once some folks attach a scientific label to a being, they stop exploring who it is. But with newly created names, I keep looking even closer to see if I've gotten it right. And so today, it is not Picea sichensis, but strong arms covered in moss, branch like a wing, instead of Thuya plicata. Most people don't know the names of these relatives. In fact, they hardly even see them. Names are the way we humans build a relationship, not only with each other, but with the living world. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like going through life not knowing the names of the plants and animals around you. Given who I am and what I do, I can't know what that's like, but I think it would be a little scary and disorienting, like being lost in a foreign city where you can't read the street signs. Philosophers call this state of isolation and disconnection species loneliness, a deep unnamed sadness, stemming from the estrangement from the rest of creation, from the loss of relationship. As our human dominance of the world has grown, we have become more isolated, more lonely, when we can no longer call out to our neighbors. It's no wonder that naming was the first job the Creator gave Nanabojo.
He walked the land, handing out names to all he met, and Anishabe Linnaeus. I like to think of the two of them walking together. Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist and zoologist, in his loden jacket and woolen trousers, with a felt hat cocked back on his forehead, and a vasculum under his arm, and Nanabozo naked but for his breechcloth and a single feather, with a buckskin bag under his arm. They stroll along discussing the names for things. They're both so enthusiastic, pointing out the beautiful leaf shapes, the incomparable flowers. Linnaeus explains his Systema Naturae, a scheme designed to show the ways in which all things are related. Nanabozo nods enthusiastically. Yes, that is also our way. We say we are all related. He explains that there was a time when all beings spoke the same language and could understand one another, so all of creation knew each other's names. Linnaeus looks wistful about that. I ended up having to translate everything into Latin, he says of binomial nomenclature. We lost another common language long ago. Linnaeus lends Nanabojo his magnifying glass so he can see the tiny floral parts. Nanabojo gives Linnaeus a song so he can see their spirits. And neither of them are lonely. After his eastern sojourn, Nanabojo's footsteps took him next to the south. Ja'awang, the land of birth and growth. From the south comes the green that covers the world in spring, carried on the warm winds. There, cedar, Xig, the sacred plant of the south, shared her teachings with him. Her branches are medicine that purify and protect life within her embrace. He carried Xig with him to remind him that to be indigenous is to protect life on earth. Following the original instructions, Benton Benai recounts that Nanabojo also had the task to learn how to live from his elder brothers and sisters. When he needed food, he noticed what the animals were eating and copied them. Heron taught him to gather wild rice. One night by the creek, he saw a little ring-tailed animal carefully washing his food with delicate hands. He thought, I am supposed to put only clean food in my body. Nanabojo was counseled by many plants, too, who shared gifts and knew and learned to treat them always with the greatest respect. After all, plants were here first on the earth and have had a long time to figure things out. Together, all the beings, both plants and animals, taught him what he needed to know. The Creator had told him it would be this way. His elder brothers and sisters also inspired Nanabojo to make new things in order to survive. Beaver showed him how to make an axe. Whale gave him the shape for his canoe. He'd been instructed that if he could combine the lessons from nature with the strength of his own good mind, he could discover new things that would be useful for the people to come. In his mind, grandmother's spider web became a fishnet. He followed the winter lessons of squirrels to create maple sugar. The lessons Nanabojo learned are the mythic roots of native science, medicine, architecture, agriculture, and ecological knowledge. But true to the circle of time, science and technology are starting to catch up with native science by adopting the Nanabojo approach, looking to nature for models of design, by the architects of biomimicry, by honoring the knowledge in the land and caring for its keepers. We start to become indigenous to place.
To each of the four directions, Nanabojo wandered on long, strong legs. Singing loudly as he went, he didn't hear the birds' chirps of caution and was duly surprised when Grizzly challenged him. After that, when he came near the territories of others, he did not just blunder in as if the whole world belonged to him. He learned to sit quietly at the edge of the woods and wait to be invited. Then Benton Benai recounts, Nanabojo would rise and speak these words to the citizens of that place. I wish not to mar the beauty of the earth or to disturb my brother's purpose. I ask that I be allowed to pass. He saw flowers blooming through the snow, ravens who spoke to wolves and insects who lit the prairie nights. His gratitude for their abilities grew, and he came to understand that to carry a gift is also to carry a responsibility. The Creator gave wood thrush the gift of a beautiful song, with the duty to sing the forest goodnight. Late at night, he was grateful that the stars were sparkling to guide his way. Breathing underwater, flying to the ends of the earth and back, digging earthen dens, making medicines. Every being with a gift, every being with a responsibility. He considered his own empty hands. He had to rely on the world to take care of him. From my high bluff on the coast, I look east, and the hills before me are a ragged range of clear-cut forests. To the south, I see an estuary dammed and diked so that salmon may no longer pass. On the western horizon, a bottom-dragging trawler scrapes up the ocean floor. And far away to the north, the earth is torn open for oil. Had the new people learned what original man was taught at a council of animals, never damage creation, and never interfere with the sacred purpose of another being, the eagle would look down on a different world. The salmon would be crowding up the rivers, and passenger pigeons would darken the sky. Wolves, cranes, Nehelem cougars, Lenape, old growth forests would still be here, each fulfilling their sacred purpose. I would still be speaking Potawatomi. We would see what Nanabazo saw. It does not bear too much imagining, for in that direction lies heartbreak. Against the backdrop of that history, an invitation to settler society to become indigenous to place feels like a free ticket to a housebreaking party. It could be read as an open invitation to take what little is left. Can settlers be trusted to follow Nanabojo, to walk so that each step is greeting to Mother Earth? Grief and fear still sit in the shadows behind the glimmer of hope. Together, they try to hold my heart closed. But I need to remember that the grief is the settlers as well. They too will never walk in a tall grass prairie where sunflowers dance with goldfinches. Their children have also lost the chance to sing at the maple dance. They can't drink the water either.
In his journey to the north, Nanabojo found the medicine teachers. They gave him Wingashk to teach him the ways of compassion, kindness, and healing, even for those who have made bad mistakes, for who has not? To become indigenous is to grow the circle of healing to include all of creation. Sweetgrass in a long braid offers protection to a traveler, and Nanabojo put some in his bag. A path scented with sweetgrass leads to a landscape of forgiveness and healing for all who need it. She doesn't give her gift only to some. When Nanabojo came to the west, he found many things that frightened him. The earth shook beneath his feet. He saw great fires consume the land. Sage, Mishkodewashk, the sacred plant of the west, was there to help him, to wash away fear. Benton Benai reminds us that Firekeeper himself came to Nanabojo. This is the same fire that warms your lodge, he said. All powers have two sides, the power to create and the power to destroy. We must recognize them both, but invest in our gifts on the side of creation. Nanabojo learned that in the duality of all things, he had a twin brother who was as committed to making imbalance as Nanabojo was dedicated to balance. That twin had learned the interplay of creation and destruction and rocked it like a boat on a choppy sea to keep people out of balance. He found that the arrogance of power could be used to unleash unlimited growth, an unrestrained, cancerous sort of creation that would lead to destruction. Nanabojo vowed to walk with humility in order to try to balance his twin's arrogance. That too is the task of those who would walk in his footsteps. I go to sit with my Sitka spruce grandmother to think. I am not from here, just a stranger who comes with gratitude and respect and questions of how it is we come to belong to a place. And yet she makes me welcome, just as we are told the big trees of the West kindly looked after Nanabojo. Even as I sit in her still shadow, my thoughts are all tangled. Like my elders before me, I want to envision a way that an immigrant society could become indigenous to place. but I'm stumbling on the words. Immigrants cannot, by definition, be indigenous. Indigenous is a birthright word. No amount of time or caring changes history or substitutes for soul deep fusion with the land. Following Nana Bojo's footsteps doesn't guarantee transformation of second man to first. But if people do not feel indigenous, can they nevertheless enter into the deep reciprocity that renews the world? Is this something that can be learned? Where are the teachers? I'm remembering the words of Elder Henry Lickers. You know, they came here thinking they'd get rich by working on the land, so they dug their mines and cut down the trees. But the land is the one with the power. While they were working on the land was working on them, teaching them. I sit a long time, and eventually the sound of the wind in Grandmother Sitka's branches washes words away, and I lose myself in just listening to the crisp voice of laurels, the chatter of alders, the whispers of lichens. I have to be reminded, just like Nana Bojo, that the plants are our oldest teachers.
I get up from my needle-soft nook between grandmother's roots and walk back to the trail, where I am stopped in my tracks. Bedazzled by my new neighbors, giant firs, sword fern, and salal, I had passed by an old friend without recognition. I'm embarrassed to not have greeted him before. From the east coast to the edge of the west, he had walked here. Our people have a name for this round-leafed plant, white man's footstep. Just a low circle of leaves, pressed close to the ground with no stem to speak of, it arrived with the first settlers and followed them everywhere they went. Trotted along paths, through the woods, along wagon roads and railroads, like a faithful dog so as to be near them. Linnaeus called it Plantago major, the common plantain. Its Latin epithet, plantago, refers to the sole of a foot. At first, the native people were distrustful of a plant that came with so much trouble trailing behind. But Nana Bojo's people knew that all things have a purpose and that we must not interfere with its fulfillment. When it became clear that White Man's Footstep would be staying on Turtle Island, they began to learn about its gifts. In spring, it makes a good pot of greens before summer heat turns the leaves tough. The people became glad for its constant presence when they learned that the leaves, when they are rolled or chewed to a poultice, make a fine first aid for cuts, burns, and especially insect bites. Every part of the plant is useful. Those tiny seeds are good medicine for digestion. The leaves can help bleeding right away and heal wounds without infection. This wise and generous plant, faithfully following the people, became an honored member of the plant community. It's a foreigner, an immigrant, but after 500 years of living as a good neighbor, people forget that kind of thing. Our immigrant plant teachers offer a lot of different models for how not to make themselves welcome on a new continent. Garlic mustard poisons the soil so that native species will die. Tamarisk uses up all the water. Foreign invaders like loosestrife, kudzu, and cheatgrass have the colonizing habit of taking over others' homes and growing without regard to limits. But plantain is not like that. Its strategy was to be useful, to fit into small places, to coexist with others around the dooryard, to heal wounds. Plantain is so prevalent, so well integrated, that we think of it as native. It has earned the name bestowed by botanists for plants that have become our own. Plantain is not indigenous, but naturalized. This is the same term we use for the foreign-born when they become citizens in our country. They pledge to uphold the laws of the state. They might well uphold Nana Bojo's original instructions too.
Maybe the task assigned to second man is to unlearn the model of kutsu and follow the teachings of white man's footsteps, to strive to become naturalized to place, to throw off the mindset of the immigrant. Being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's futures matters. To take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all of our relatives depend on it, because they do. As time circles around on itself again, maybe white man's footsteps is following in Nana Bushu's. Perhaps plantain will line the homeward path we could follow. White man's footsteps, generous and healing, grows with its leaves so close to the ground that each step is a greeting to Mother Earth.
Thanks everyone for reading. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. That was really nice. I'm just lying down, listening, appreciating it.
I love what she said about kind of making a name for a place gives it something, makes it real. And I was thinking about how language in her case also makes all her experiences real. Like it's as if she's constantly naming things that when she's saying them, I realize I've always seen them, but until she named them, I'm not sure I felt them as real as I do after she uses words to name things.
Yes, and I like how, like in the tradition, we usually like follow the Bible, and like God gave Adam the task of naming everything. But I like, and that's like the ego centric thing, but I like this one where he was given the task of learning the names of everything by studying them and talking to them and finding out what their true essence is and then naming that. I love that part.
this reminds me even of the chapter we read last week on old growth children and the cedars, and how I'm forgetting the name of the man who was replanting the old growth forest, but how he had given, where normally the names would be like uh, given by the government to these plots of like regrowth, um, would be like plot 15679. He gave them really beautiful names. Like I'm forgetting what they are now, but how even, yeah, I mean, you see these themes kind of through her book about naming and about gifts, and the gift of language kind of ties together these two, as the gift that we've received from Creator. So it's just really beautiful.
Yeah, I also wanted to say I read this book before, and I remember in another chapter she talks about this deep fallacy of grammar, where a lot of the English language names living beings, or especially in the scientific rhetoric too, as kind of a thing or an object, versus a uh, a being with agency. And so, yeah, I just think that not only naming, but how you name and the grammar you use behind that language is so valuable and important to think about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's language mediates our. I feel like language is the point at which the earth stops and the world begins, or something like that. And it's that point where we can either operate in a more porous way through our language between the world and the earth, or we can create a boundary between the two that's really stark and binarical. And I feel like through our language of like exactly what you're talking about, Kelly, with calling these living beings objects in the way we refer to them, that just highlights like the nature, culture, whatever divide, instead of maybe opening up the boundary to be more porous through our grammar.
I really liked hearing the Nana Bojo's story, and especially kind of the piece on the instructions being laid out in front of you, that in order to just observe plants and animals and how they're living just leads to your own survival. And if it kind of really, even goes back to the earlier chapter with the story about her father and the kind of ceremony that he created. Like there's a lot of intuition and observation that those two things can get you a lot further. I feel like in this capitalist settler colonist society, has created everything to be really complex in a way to use that as power to really the more complex the thing is, it's harder to understand it, but our relationship is so much more kind of it's so much more deeper than that, more intimate, that like just by seeing and observing from our own eyes we can live more sustainably. But with the complexity of how government and ideas of property ownership and so many other things, that kind of gets in the way of making ideas to live more sustainably in our world, becomes so much more problematic. But not to say that other worldviews are much more simplistic in looking at things, but I think we've created so many things, so many different barriers for understanding our natural world, that it's just this kind of like gut feeling that we have that really should be guiding us, and that relationship we're looking at. I just found it really beautiful to hear that kind of story with Nana Bojo too.
This is a lovely observation, Kavi. I resonate with that in a sense, because I studied the sciences, and there was a point at which like learning more statistics and methodologies and things, it was like, but we're missing something in our gut, something in our heart, and finding that is so key to really knowing anything, you know, numbers. And so anyway, I like what, I really appreciate your comment.
And I just like what you said, Kelly, too, about, you know, science. It reminded me of the where Linnaeus and they were walking together, and Linnaeus gave him the magnifying glass so he could see the tiny thing. But then I don't know how to pronounce the name, but he gave him the song so they could learn the nature of the spirit of the plants. So it goes together. I think that's what I just heard you say, basically.
Yeah, I was struck, Linda, what you said before about, you know, the religion, you know, in the Judeo-Christian religion, you know, it comes from on high and the word, and it's named. And I love the part of the Native American tradition where they actually listen to the plants and listen with humility. That's a word that really, you know, he had this evil twin who was like, I guess, a capitalist, but, you know, he was going to walk with humility. And it's great. It's a wonderful philosophy. And I wish it was the way of the world, but it's like, the evil twin seems to be winning most of the time lately. So in a way, this so inspiring and poetic, but I also feel very sad listening to this because there's a lot of loss. You know, they were talking about the loss of, you know, the things that our, you know, parents and our children will not see, that we have not seen. So it's very, I didn't feel hopeful from it. I felt moved and inspired by the humility of the offering, but and the whole beauty of the poetry, but it's just left me feeling sad. So anyway, thought I'd share that.
You know, maybe there's a hope in what's being called for in this, which seems to me it's a balance of perception, that the naming is only possible, the true naming of another being is only possible when sensing its life. And I guess I'm a cockeyed optimist anyhow, but I think there's something about let it begin with me right now, with whatever I'm trying to perceive, that it's in me how I perceive. And that balance, even though we're more practiced in just the external descriptions, that because we resonate so much with how she's describing things, I think it shows we know what she's talking about, and that there is an organism that is available to see in that way too.
I guess question I had, something that I was wrestling with this reading, was the use of the word naturalized, because as many people are saying here, it's something within us that we feel. And so I understand making the comparison to naturalization of citizenship because it's something that we can like grab onto in our world, but also I feel like it's a comparison that almost further highlights like these structures we've created or invented, that such as like citizenship and statehood and borders that we can like traverse and then become a part of in a way that is not necessarily, like she says, hopefully those that are naturalized will care as well. But I guess this like use of the word naturalization just brings up questions for me in regards to like giving like value to almost like a kind of governance or state power. Not that I think she's doing that at all. I think I'm reading into it, but it's just something I was thinking about.
I think what she means by naturalized is, you know, everybody's, if you're an immigrant, you can't, that's what she said, if you're an immigrant, you can't, it's not your place, so it's, you're not native. But what you can be is naturalized. Like anybody who had parents or grandparents who came from another country, we've all been immigrants. So we have to naturalize ourselves to the place, to the trees where we live, you know, to the generations. It's our home now. So it becomes our place. That's what I think she meant by that. But you have to get into your land and listen to your trees and your surroundings. That's what I got from it, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I feel like that is spot on. I guess I was just kind of challenging the use of the word naturalization as a marker of citizenship that's bound to the government deciding who can stay and who can go. But I don't think she was saying that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I actually heard her way of using that word more in relation to like ecology and how different species of plants can become naturalized to a certain ecosystem so that they don't overstep their bounds too. So there's like, but I know what you're talking about, Izzy, about the relationship to that other structure. But I think that there's different ways of thinking about that term, and I actually think it's one of the more interesting aspects of that chapter because it's something I think we all struggle with because, I mean, myself, I have this like mix of, I'm an immigrant. I actually do have some native blood, but it's like very remote and like, and you know, so it's just, I loved how she opened the door to this conversation about what it would take for us, since we're here now. Uh-oh, there's an alarm going off. What it would take to, yeah, to dig our roots in deeper, you know, and like opening the door to that conversation, even though it's scary because it's usually, yeah, a closed conversation. But anyway.
That also makes me think of a dialogue I've heard some ecologists and farmers participate in that's questioning the use of like the term invasive to describe species and how like an alternative idea is to use the word opportunistic, which I like as a concept. Um, and also personally, like I love working with mushrooms, and whenever I'm reading about like the mycelium colonizing, I'm like, isn't there like a better word that we could use for this? Because mushrooms are like so generative and like fecund. Like why do we have to use this terrible word?
It's interesting, Jasmine, that you mentioned that because I was just thinking of mushroom and mycelium as well. And I was thinking about, I think last year when we were reading Amit Singh's The Mushroom at the End of the World, she sort of introduces this idea of that we're talking about with the word naturalize or colonize in the sense that fungus are their own kingdom that don't have, they're not plants and they're not animals, they're their own kingdom. And it's interesting that we also discuss them as if we were in charge of them, like using them to detoxify is like puts us in this weird position, like they're going to do that anyway. Like, but facilitating their agency is a very different way to sort of say, like, you know, we're going to use them too, you know. So I do think there is this like whole kind of thing that Kelly brought up about it's not just the words, it's the grammar, which is ultimately like relational, you know, because it puts you in relationship to these things.
Yeah, I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm communicating on Instagram with Ansu, who's got a comment to throw in. She's saying, you know, it's also about how we can intentionally approximate indigeneity in reference to the natural context, even when you're not indigenous in a historic sense.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that?
She's saying in relationship to our conversation about, you know, to naturalize, how to intentionally approximate indigeneity in reference to the natural context, even when you're not indigenous in a historic sense. I think she's saying that's what she believes that the author is doing, is kind of practicing a way to be not indigenous, but you naturalize, you become naturalized to this place that you are, including to develop sensitivity, learned sensitivity, studied sensitivity to indigeneity, which is potentially why it's so important for us to collectively read, those of us who are not indigenous, for us to collectively read books like Braiding Sweetgrass and discuss them together. It's also about finding the right language to talk about who we are here on this continent. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, and it sounds like that approximating indigeneity is like learning the laws of the land, like the real laws of the land, and what it teaches. And of course, there's history too, with the people who have been in connection with the land and the world, the earth, differently than we immigrants have.
Yeah, in a way, she kind of defined it. And I think what she was talking about by being naturalized, because that one part where she talked about he carried Kijig with him to remind him that to be indigenous is to protect life on Earth. So that's, to me, sort of the definition of it, in kind of that sums up what she was talking about, in my opinion.
One last thought I was having is it seems that she points a lot to the power of origin stories and the stories that we tell in general to guide our ability to naturalize, to connect, to see the world around us. And yeah, I think that some of the underlying seeded origin stories that are in our policies and our larger scale bureaucratic systems are, you know, a root issue keeping us unnaturalized. And so, yeah, I don't know, it's just a reflection, the last reflection on that interesting topic.
Thank you, Kelly.